Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. And at yesterday's briefing, His Majesty of the Trust Fund, ruler of the Four Kingdoms, the imposer of mass, the mass gathering of one, Lord Jellybelly of the Hyatt, master of the data, guardian of the public sector unions, and protector of the Krispy Kreme, clarified a few things.
You can't say that enough. That is so insightful and pithy.
He holds a lot of titles.
Yes, he does.
He is King JB of House Pritzker. We learned a few things.
There you go again.
That church service for more than 10 people, I don't know. Long time. Don't know how long. And what constitutes an effective therapeutic? I don't know. I talked to my pediatrician friend from Oak Park. She didn't really know either. It sort of sounds like what we're doing now, but it's not. But it could be, but we don't know. And when are we going to get a vaccine? I don't know. When are we going to get a vaccine for HIV? When are we going to get a vaccine for other viral outbreaks over the last 2 decades that we don't have yet?
Yeah, and so we can't go back unless there's a vaccine, a treatment, and the number of cases are down, even though the number of testing is through the roof.
Yeah, and rather than listening to these politicians, how about another medical professional in the state who's got some skin in the game? Dr. Kevin Most is the chief medical officer for Central DuPage Hospital. He was interviewed by former state representative Jeannie Ives as her effort to enlist other voices for her prospective constituents in the western and northwestern suburbs. And here's what Dr. Most, he's a doctor too.
Don't you know? Not
all doctors agree, especially those not employed by the state or part of the upper echelon of the Pritzker administration. Not all studies comport with what Pritzker is telling you. The data doesn't support what he's doing, and so forth. I know this will fall on deaf ears outside of our listening audience, but I say it nonetheless, and now Dr. Kevin Most will say more.
Certainly, I read the governor's letter yesterday, and we're in phase 2. Reading the governor's letter, we may be in phase 2 for quite some time, which is unfortunate. For us to get to phase 5, the way he has described phase 5, it may be a year from now. It may be a year and a half from now, because we may not have a vaccine by that time. When you talk about the medications, we are very hopeful that remdesivir helps. But again, it's not a real, it's not a wonderful drug. It's not like an antibiotic where you take it in a couple of days, you feel better. This is more like Tamiflu, which we use for influenza. So instead of someone being sick for 14 days, they're sick for 10 days. That's not a cure, and that's not going to slow the spread. So the breakdown of the state, the way he's broken it down into the 4 areas, I can tell you that your area that we live in is going to be the last one to get to phase 5, just because the population that we have here and the number of cases that we already have. So you read it, I'm glad that we have a plan, but I would hope that that plan would change in some way. If not, I'm going to need to braid my hair or do something with my hair, because we're not looking at haircuts for quite some while for this to happen. And I mean, I say that jokingly, but I mean it's also serious that the way the phases are broken down, we won't get to that point, phase 5, where we can get 50 people together in quite some time based on vaccine or an effective treatment.
Did you hear that, DuPage County? Did you hear that? Did that register in Tony Hinsdale? And I know most of the western suburbs, not named Wheaton, that have or Oak Brook, that have gone the way of the Chicago Machine Democrat, at least with their public official choices. Did you hear that? You're locked in for that?
And people in DuPage County should know there's 1,362 cases. Of them, about 1,000 or more than 1,000 are from nursing home.
Well, not everybody's going along, and we have this conversation against the backdrop of the first-time unemployment filings this week, 3.17 million. So that's now 33 million plus over the last 6 weeks. The mayor of East Peoria has suggested that this is the action that he is taking, that his community is taking, is not in some sort of defiance, William Wallace style defiance against the king. It's just him acting in furtherance with the support of his community to do what's best for his community. That has nonetheless drawn a rebuke from Governor Pritzker, because anybody who defies his order or relies on studies, models, experts who are not part of the Pritzker team or the work product of the Pritzker team, well, they're a danger to the public health. And so John Kahl, mayor of East Peoria, is also a danger to the public health, just as State Representative Darren Bailey is, just as State Representative John Cabello is, just as we are, just as anybody who offers anything other than quiet obedience. That's a heck of a state of affairs in this state. Something to be very proud of, the blindly and quietly obedient. You should be very proud of yourselves. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by John Kahl, the mayor of East Peoria. Mayor, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and that was well said.
Thank you. And so what does reopening in East Peoria look like? And have you, prepared all of your papers for when the Pritzker team comes to take you away?
Well, I don't know if that's going to happen. Don't know that that can happen. But with that being said, we have over 900 businesses here, a lot of small businesses that are deemed by Governor Pritzker and his administration as being non-essential versus essential, which we all know that's very subjective in itself. Mm-hmm. So those small businesses are taking advantage of our approach here. They're very appreciative, and at the end of the day, they have every right to protect their livelihood.
So you sent a phased reopening plan to Governor Pritzker last week, urging him to begin reopening the state. And did you ever receive a response from him?
I did not, Amy. Actually, I spoke with the governor 2 weeks ago, and I submitted this plan I had drafted, which I think is very reasonable and measured, to the governor 2 weeks ago. Did not hear back from him, so is what we basically did. A group of mayors, like 26, 27 of us, started a conversation, and we ended up with 21 signatures of elected officials through 4 counties, and we resubmitted that same plan that I thought was applicable to all 4 counties. But we have not heard personally back from him, and based on the comments that he's made when it's been brought up, I don't suspect we will.
What was the conversation like, the one you had with Governor Pritzker?
It was actually very respectful. It was two-way. I told him we had worked on a plan here in the city of East Peoria as we needed a path forward coming out of the original executive order, the stay-at-home order that was due to expire, April 30th at midnight. So he seemed receptive. He wanted to see the plan. I said I would send it to him, which I did. They acknowledged receiving it. But at the end of the day, he was focused on, this peak. He was looking for this peak, and he kept referring to the scientist. And I respectfully disagreed and said I think it's going to be more of a plateau. And as the testing has increased, the positivity rate, which is the latest term, it has actually declined. So we respectfully disagreed on that, and that's.
So, Mayor, what's your plan?
Mm-hmm.
And when do you start opening? Well, you started opening last Friday, correct?
Yes, we started opening last Friday. Unfortunately, the businesses, you've heard him mention this in his briefings over the course of the last week, that fall under the state licensing authority. The state's making it pretty clear to them that they will not support allowing them to reopen, if you will. But as I said, we had a lot of small businesses that have reopened. These folks are basically up against the wall. Either they reopen and take that risk, or they have nothing left. Some of them worked their entire life and put that life savings into these businesses to watch it, get wiped out over 45 days. It's very disheartening. And as elected officials, our oath is to the people, that elected us and we represent, and we're giving them a path forward.
When you mentioned taking a bit of a regional approach, the elected officials that you conferred with from the region, and so is what you're doing the regional consensus, and thus are we likely to see more of it?
I certainly hope so. I will tell you now that this is, hit the media up in the Chicagoland area. I've been contacted by, other elected officials from Chicago down to Southern Illinois, and I think once we start having more conversations about this and people take a hard look at it and realize what their rights are under the law, that I think more people are going to be apt to stand up and speak up. I mean, you have to protect yourself, and you have a voice, you need to use it.
And what are your constituents saying to you and the people of your town?
It has been overwhelmingly supportive of our decision, beyond our expectations, quite honestly.
Yeah.
People are very appreciative.
It's like talking to Pastor Kahl out Stevenson County Way in Lena, Illinois, where he talks about what you're hearing at task force briefings from the governor and his people, and then what is actually occurring on the ground in regular Illinois, as he termed it, outside of Chicago Metro. It's just a very different culture, a very different approach. Seems like a lot more common sense. People have their heads about them. And I think that's just generally a better way to go through life, but we've chosen a different path up here in Chicago Metro. I don't know why. Yeah. Here is another question for you, because you talked about the oath that you took as mayor of East Peoria. The oath that you took as a U.S. Marine, and maybe a general comment about what you think about what's happening in this state and this country in this time as somebody who served it and served to protect and defend.
I find it very disheartening, especially as a combat veteran. We do have a Constitution of the United States. We have a Constitution, the state of Illinois, and you look at the civil liberties. Whatever happened to personal responsibility and people having the right to, protect themselves, provide for their families, protect their businesses. I'm just absolutely amazed. And, we heard the governor say for how many days that he had the legal authority to extend his executive order under the Emergency Management Act. And here, April 30th, we saw at the 11th hour, he realized that wasn't the case under the law. And what did he do? He went and, came out with another disaster proclamation for the same disaster and another executive order for another 30 days. So it's just disheartening, and that's I just never thought in my lifetime I would see a time when the government can dictate so much.
I really admire what you're doing, and I was just wondering before we let you go if you could tell us what is the caseload like there in Peoria, in East Peoria, and in your county?
Absolutely. They jumped them by 20 yesterday, according to what I heard on the news. The last update I received, which was yesterday afternoon, we were looking at a total of 175 positive cases. My understanding that's 195. And this is in a tri-county area with a population of 361,000 people. Mm-hmm. So, and we've had a total of 8 deaths. So 195 positive cases and 8 deaths. So, the numbers didn't materialize, and it's time we start moving in a different direction.
And when are you thinking about announcing your candidacy for governor in 2022? I mean,
not even on my radar. I promise you that.
Oh, all right.
Aww.
Well,
Don't break hearts.
Thought I'd try. He is John Kahl. He's the mayor of East Peoria. Mayor Kahl, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. You guys take care.
Yeah, God bless you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.